Good afternoon, everybody. We've just tipped over into afternoon. Thanks for coming back and joining us for the second talk today. This is going to be an absolutely fantastic session that you are going to you're going to be telling your kids about this one, I'm sure. Now, and I say this realistically because with us for our talk is a man who is responsible, not that he knows it, for me getting detention 3 times at school for loading his game onto school computers. This is a man who created an entire genre of gaming that is as strong today as it ever was. He is synonymous with one of the greatest 8-bit management simulations ever created. The creator of Football Manager, who's going to tell us a bit about those heady days and what he's working on now with his upcoming Football Star Manager product. Please welcome Kevin Toms.
Thank you for that. And I decided I would stand up, although it's a long way down to the computer for me. I am going to talk a bit about some history, very much so, the very roots and when Football Manager, the original game, was created in 1982. I'm going to do a bit of past, present, and future with some photos to prompt me. So the beginning, 1982, in fact 1981, I was writing the original Football Manager, and this little apartment in Milton Keynes was where I was writing it. It's in Connyborough Boulevard in Milton Keynes, and this was a photo taken at the time. The building's still there, all the apartments are still there, they look slightly different. And I can recognize the net curtains in the top apartment where I did the work. And I can remember the drop leaf table where I wrote Football Manager on the ZX81 and the Video Genie TRS-80. It was a Video Genie, was the first version that I wrote, and I adapted it to the ZX81, which was a really important move. And everything began there, and that I will go on to how it evolved from just the idea. So, still showing that. Okay, the ZX81, of course, was critical. I did originally write the game on a Video Genie computer, which was a TRS-80 clone. And I can remember buying it in Tottenham Court Road. It cost £325. I remember that as well, which I think would be equivalent to about £2,000 a day. And my girlfriend at the time, I said, this is going to be an investment, and because she was giving me a hard time saying what you're buying this stupid gadget for and spending all that money. And I said, no, this is going to make us money. That was more in hope than anything, but in fact, it did. But having said that, I did make a very smart move a couple of months before I launched the game of converting it to the ZX81. And that was very relevant because of the first 300 games I sold, 297 were on the ZX81 and 3 were on the TRS-80 Video Genie. And if I'd launched the game on the TRS-80 Video Genie as the format, I wouldn't have made the money back on the adverts at all and wouldn't have got off the ground. And it was all self-done. There were no publishers, so it wasn't a case of like what publisher will want this game or think about that. That wasn't in my thoughts at all. The only way to do it was to sell it yourself. It was a hobbyist market. There were no retail outlets. It's hard to believe. There was no way you could go and buy computer games except by mail. So it needed packaging, so I just made this printed basically on red card and black print. As you can see, it's a very early one. It even says ZX80/81. It was available for both, but it did need that 16K RAM pack. There's no way I could have got the game in, even though it was a text-based game. I really needed that memory, and it was a major constriction just trying to get everything to work in the memory. And this is actually the first advert in Computer and Video Games magazine in the bottom left corner there. It was a quarter-page advert. I think it cost about £120 at the time. And as I said, I wouldn't have got my money back if I'd sold just the TRS-80 version. And it listed the features and tried to get you interested in it. What was different at the time was there was nothing else like it, and also the number of features it had compared to what many people were doing was cloning arcade games and trying to produce copies of arcade games. So it was very unusual. And continuing the theme of the DIY business that this was, this is an actual manufactured cassette. You can see the incredible quality of the manufacturing here with the printed red sticker. There was the address in Conyburr, or P.O. Box we had at the time. And that cassette, I can remember, I just slipped on a wire. I can remember that cassette very well because the first tapes I made, I went to Tandy's, which existed at the time, and I bought 300 C60, the smallest cassettes they had, at a discount price. Yeah? Yeah.
Brilliant game. I love it.
Okay. That's the one, the very first Football Manager. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so literally do it yourself. Got the cassettes from Tandy, printed the cover myself, and manufactured by recording to tape. And I can even remember being at a game show and somebody said to me, what if the game doesn't work on my cassette recorder? And I said, if that happens, I said, you let me know what cassette recorder you've got, and I'll buy that and make one using it. And I never needed to. And what I was using, again, Tandy, was a Tandy cassette recorder. And I never had anybody say they couldn't load the game. So I was just making them myself in the bedroom in that little flat. Another part of the DIY was Jiffy Bag. All the games were sent out in Jiffy Bag. So people would respond to that advert and send checks or postal orders. And I would receive that, and I can still remember the first ones, the thrill of the first ones dropping through the letterbox because, of course, oh my God, there are actual sales. People are actually buying it. And then you'd have, the cassette packaging, make the cassette, put it in the Jiffy Bag. And I can remember I also was smart enough to use department codes in the advertising as well, so I could tell which magazine was making the sales, because that was a very difficult challenge at the time. But the Jiffy Bags became interesting because I would be going across to the post office across the road from that apartment in Milton Keynes and posting out whatever sales I'd made that day or that few days and packaged them up. And it got to an interesting point where I went one day to the post office counter with 92 Jiffy Bags because there'd been quite a few sales. And the guy said to me, who had seen me come in many times, he said, you realize with this number we'll come and collect from you. And I said, you would? I was like amazed. And then from then on, they literally used to call round at my little flat and collect the bags for me on a regular basis, from the packages from me on a regular basis. Also part of that early time, these were really important too. I gained a lot from these. These were the ZX microfairs, which were held in London regularly. For people who owned Sinclair computers, they were a wonderful thing because they were a chance to go and meet the people who were selling the games and talk about it, and a chance to go in one place and get the games as well. I can remember very early on, I think it was the first one I went to, so you can imagine it was like a whole new experience. It was trestle tables, it was like market trading type experience. And all of us pretty much who were there were all learning on the job what we were doing. All the people who were writing games at that time were novices to business. And I can remember had quite a good day in this one day in London. In the evening we had a hotel. I was there with my girlfriend, and I put the cash on the bed to see how much I'd made. And she lost a red earring during the day, and she was saying, my earring, I've lost my little red earring. I don't know what's happened to my little red earring. It was a plastic earring. I said, there's £1,000 on the bed there, and you're worried about your red earring, your plastic earring. £1,000, you know, probably about 8,000 now. So it was a lot of money for one day. And I know at that time my salary was 8,000 a year. So this was £1,000 in one day. So I had a business, as I discovered. But those fairs were great. They were also a great atmosphere, and it was a great opportunity for me to meet people playing the games, because they were just distant, you know. There was no internet connection, no messaging or anything like that. So it was great in another way. This actually is the Spectrum version. It came later in the year. But it always makes me smile because of the names of the players, which were very much of the era. And a lot of people recognize them. They were the names in the first games. There was no worry about licensing names or anything like that in those days. All the names of the teams or anything like that. But the game kind of captured the basics of the game, which was you had players in different positions, of course, like football. The number was used to select them because it wasn't a touchscreen. And then a skill rating out of 5. I kept it to a nice limited range. And the energy rating over 20, which went down as they played, and you had to rest them. So it was a very straightforward balance in the game, but in the risk of injury as well. And of course, the cheap prices of the players there as well, which is different today. Another little thing there is 99 to continue. The people who played the Spectrum game will recognize that for that and the ZX81. And it actually has its own little roots, because it came from the fact that I wasn't somebody who learned, as I was discussing earlier, I wasn't somebody who learned to program on the ZX81 or anything like that. I was actually a professional programmer who'd programmed mainframes and done business systems, and then could see that I could do this. What it was actually a board game that I tried for many years until I got hold of a computer. And I realized I could do this on a computer. And in the mainframes, when you were selecting things from a list, of 10, 20 items, and you had to select by number, because it was a typical text screen. If you needed to continue to the next screen, you would typically be typing 99, and I just kind of used the same thing. But people got very familiar with that. And H equals copy. That was the ZX printer, being able to copy to the ZX printer. So you could copy your records. And this was also part of the upgrade that came when I wrote the Spectrum version. Now, I showed you the apartment where I wrote the game originally. The core of the game is ZX81 and the TRS-80 Video Genie version. That was the same place that later in the year that I did the Spectrum upgrade. And I can still remember, again, that trestle table where I had the computer set up in the corner of the room in that one-bedroom flat, and was working on this. I had the idea that I was going to do color. I had the idea that I had more memory, 3 times as much memory, so I could be less limited by the memory. And I got the idea to do the stickman graphics as well. They were actually triggered by the fact that I used to play around with drawing match action when I was a kid, and I would always draw stickmen because I wasn't much of an artist. So. And I had the same idea, and then I realized I could kind of make it work. And the interesting thing about it was that the reason why people remember it and enjoyed it is because it was designed that there was an infinite number of variations. Although it's within limitations, you could never be sure what was going to happen. And otherwise, it would be predictable. You say, oh, I know what's going to happen. They've started in this position. I made sure that that couldn't happen. And they were working out as they moved what was going to happen. Now, this is a comparison of the original packaging and a later packaging. Because about the time that the Spectrum happened, I also got called by W.H. Smith, who contacted me and said, we like your game and we want to stock it. But we want you to come down and see us, and we've got to talk about a few things. And well, obviously, that was quite an amazing thing. I was selling a few games. In fact, at that point, there were retailers, independent retailers appeared. So at those ZX Micro Fairs, somebody would come up to me and say, "Oh, we've started a shop for computer games, and we'd like to stock your game." So I was selling them like with a retailer discount. It was 30% at the time. And they were buying 10 games at a time, things like that, 20 games at a time. And then W.H. Smith contacted, and I realized that was going to be different. And I took some business advice, and I talked to a business expert, and he said, "Well, I don't know computer games, it's all new." He said, "I used to work in confectionery," and he said, for what would be a wholesale sale to W.H. Smith, he said, we used to get between 50 and 70% discount taken off of the retail price, the net of VAT retail price. So I thought, okay. He said, "But I don't know." He said, "Because yours is a new industry." And I thought, "Oh, okay, if I get 50%, that's good. If 70% doesn't sound good at all, I'll try and get something better than that, and maybe 60% would be good or something." I don't know. I didn't know. I just took that information to help me when I went down there. So I went down and I met him at the offices, head office in London, and he said, "Yeah, we love your game, but one of the things we cannot accept an inlay like that, like you've got now. It's got to be full color." This is the BBC version, but it would have been the Spectrum at the time. And he said, "So we've got to do a full color inlay. Can you do that?" Of course, I said yes, without knowing what I had to do. It is. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, yeah, he's good looking. But and so he wanted that kind of look, and he said we wouldn't stock anything like this, and I said I could do that, and he said I want to order 2,000 games, and he said I want 55% discount, and so I put on my negotiation skills, and I said yes, okay, and that was as far as I went with that. But then I had the problem to solve of how to create that. And I think the next screen is relevant to what you just said. So I had to create the packaging, and it was more like the top left there when I first did it. And the golden cup with the players around it, that was my idea. And I got an artist in Bletchley, Milton Keynes, to paint it for me, and then the printers put the rest together. And it evolved over time. The picture of me came from a different reason later, but it wasn't there at the beginning. But the cup was very nice. I always liked that, and I still have that painting. And I recently published a photo of it online, and people were trying to work out who the artist was. I mean, his name is on it, but nobody's been able to track down the artist. I remember him at that printer. So there is a relevant thing about the photo there. How did that start to happen? It really came from being at the shows, like the ZX Micro Fair and other ones, things that were Earls Court. And I was talking to people, and I was explaining to them about the game, and there was a nice experience because people would sit and play the game, and they would demo it for me because they'd play for a couple of hours, and I'd say, "He's been playing for a couple of hours," and I'd explain it. And then sometimes I'd be talking to people, and they would say, "Oh yeah, I do this and that," and I would say, "Oh, I did that because," and they would say, "Oh, you wrote the game?" And I said, "Yeah." "Oh, I thought you were a salesman." I said, No, I wrote it." And then they get really animated and start talking to me, and I just clicked in my mind. I thought, well, it's just like a creative product, so it's like books and records. And I thought, music, they put the people who created the music on the cover. Books, they do that. Surely computer games is the same. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And it also means you're taking credit for it, but you're also taking the flack if it's rubbish as well. So it worked, though. And I think more should have done it. I think there are some that did it. I mean, Jeff Minter was quite well known. There were a couple of others that are well known. But I was just thinking it's my design style, and I just want to say this is my kind of game. And the next one would be similar as well. So that was my thinking behind it. Anyway, it means I'm still known today, so I can't complain. It was a good move, in fact. Slightly different on the Commodore 64. In fact, I don't like it as much, but it worked. Anyway, we were doing quite well, and the company grew. And there's been a lot of talk about being ambushed by a cake. I thought it was nothing to do with that. But this was actually a cake at the Dorchester. in the UK because we did an event because we reached 100,000 sales for the first time, which was quite something at that time of Football Manager. And actually, a little award was presented to me by Laurie McMenemy, who some of you will remember was an England football manager. It's quite interesting. And it also won an award as well. It was nominated for an award. It was actually runner-up in 1983 in the Strategy Game of the Year at Golden Joystick Awards, the early Golden Joysticks. And I always felt it was a bit unfair because the one that won it was The Hobbit, which I didn't think was really in the same genre of games, sort of an adventure game. But, you know, I'm not complaining. The other thing was, anybody around that time who was in that era will remember that advert as well, because that was a very successful advert. I wanted to depict like color and richness and fun. I wanted that like star background and the colors. The red and yellow addictive logo had become established by that time. That was an evolution of the logo. I went 2 or 3 evolutions of that logo. And that is inspired by something. Around the time, I think Aladdin Sane by David Bowie was out with the lightning bolt, and that kind of triggered the thinking for it. But that logo then settled as being one that I really liked and kept. I think we're asking for other people to send in their games there, including the graphics. By that time, it's on the BBCB, or soon, end of March, actually. Yeah, it's coming up. Commodore 64, Oric 48K. I had this feeling that we never published the Oric, but then people have proved to me by sending me copies that we did publish the Oric, because I know we had a lot of trouble with that. But Dragon, etc., because that's also what happened. The game was very portable to different computers because most of it's text anyway. And it was ported to many different computers and sold well on all sorts of them, Commodore 16, +4, lots of different computers. And I think at that time we were promoting the stockists in Boots and John Menzies as well. Also, the other thing that happened there, the address, so the game was $6.95 on the Spectrum at that point. The address is Addictive Games in Richmond Hill in Bournemouth. I was getting offices in Milton Keynes and was seriously looking at that. And then decided this was a chance for me to move back to the coast where I kind of come from, because I grew up in Paignton, Torquay, and decided on Bournemouth. And so the main establishment of the game after the first couple of years was in Bournemouth. The business was in Bournemouth. And we get some good publicity from time to time. This was actually in the Telegraph, was a spread in the Telegraph about the games that I'd written and what I was doing. And that picture was used a lot. 2 Commodore 64s there, versions. It's also true that I didn't just write Football Manager. I also wrote another game called Software Star, which was actually a very playable game, just didn't succeed as much. Football Manager dominated partly because of the subject matter. And it was very well established. But Software Star was about running a software business and trying to have hit games. Where did I get that idea from? I don't know. And a third game that I did, which kind of fell down a little bit of a gap because the company was being acquired at that time, was a game called President. And that was about running an oil-rich country that was at war with its neighbors regularly. So it was an economy, politics, and war game all combined. The one interesting thing there was actually with President, that was the first time I was dealing with the headache which was always there, of all these different computers, because the market was very fragmented. So you had to keep changing, adapting the code to different computers. With President, it was the first time I was using a cross-development system and making like a virtual machine of the hardware and treating each machine as just a screen. And the code was the same on all the machines, which I used subsequently for Football Manager 2, which I don't think I've got a photo of actually here. Another interesting thing here, I'm sure other people who are publishing games were pissed off sometimes that football managers have kept on selling, because this was 3 years after I launched Football Manager in 1985, and it was the #1 seller on the Gallup charts on multiple formats. Later on, I sold up the game. They were still using my head on the cover, but and I did Football Manager 2, which I say don't happen to have a photo of here, which was #1 selling for about 3 months. It was top of the charts for about 3 months. And then Football Manager World Cup edition, which was a very painful experience. It's one of those times where you reach artistic differences with your publisher. So, the renewal. This happened a few years ago. I was actually living in Canada at the time. I've lived in different countries, New Zealand and Canada and some European countries. And I put out a message online. There was a few hundred people following me, and I said I could rewrite and modernize my original 80s Football Manager for the fun of it, Android, iOS. Good idea? Now, at the time, I was a mobile developer, so I just made this little photo to suggest that I could do it. And yeah, I got a very positive response and very lot of encouragement. And so I actually started the project, and it actually became a very enjoyable piece of work. This was one of the very early screens, a bit clunky, just trying to work out how the tool I was using would work on the Android. And of course, it looks very, very similar to the original, but I eventually evolved it into a slightly different way. And that game is still on the app stores. It's called Football Star Manager. And it truly is a renewal of the original game. The gameplay is a close match. People like it a lot. They play a lot of seasons on it. And it's still available today. I did it on iOS, Android, and it was also on Windows, Mac, and Kindle Fire. I don't think I've still got that available. Oops, too many. So I did some slight enhancements. The graphics are slightly better. And I added little things like you could put your team logo as a customization in the screen as well. And I added one. I didn't vary very much from the original. I didn't want to do that because that's what people didn't want me to do, to change it too much, but keep the flavor. It's a complete rewrite. It's no reference, but I understood how the first one worked, so I could get the gameplay right. So I did add a European Cup and some changes to other parts of it as well. But a lot of it was very familiar, and even the icon for the game uses the original painting, but it's Kevin Todd's Football Star Manager there. I also adapted it to Windows, obligatory coffee there, which of course fuels everything. And so that was the Windows version of the game, so it's laptops as well.
So at this time, was it based on Football Manager 1 or 2?
Yeah. No, this is based on Football Manager 1.
Never liked 2?
Yeah, well, I prefer Football Manager 1. So Football Manager 1, if I would say artistically, was producing a sort of more pure experience. Football Manager 2, there was a publisher involvement that made it much more difficult to do. And there was a lot of... ended up doing 35 versions of it for launch. And I don't think I could still do it physically. So yeah, these are also from Football Star Manager, and people will if you remember the Spectrum screen I showed earlier on. The color backgrounds are because I put in ability to change the colors to match your team. So this is a sky blue background. But the attributes are very similar to what you saw earlier, except there's proper goalkeepers this time. That was one thing I left out of the original for actually memory reasons. I couldn't have a separate attribute of goalkeeper. And so goalkeepers were part of the defense. But Parks Watson are there. And people have told me about Ricks. I don't know anything about this. I haven't lived in the country. So people told me something happened with Graham Ricks, but I don't know anything about that. But the value of the players is different. Millions rather than the 10, 25,000. So little upgrades like that, small changes. And that's what I said about the color scheme. I just added a color scheme. I added a color scheme so people could just customize the background to the team that they like. And like I said, the logo still includes that painting. And if you look, you can see a little couple of stripes across there because the painting is worn over the years and it's not in its original form. It's a bit frayed. It's decades it's been sitting around. But what I did do is I upgraded the graphics. In fact, I created over time, because I started the game, because I evolved games, I started the game with a text, very much like the ZX81 version. Then I added a retro stickmen type look as well to the animation. And then the third one, I added more modern sprites. And they certainly do a lot more. They're much more intelligent, they're much more capable, and they're responding in much more detail to the play. But it's still very retro, very retro. And it's very much loved as a game. Lots of 5-star reviews. These two examples, a couple of people sent them. They played 140 seasons in one and 83 in another, but I've had people tell me they played 500 seasons. Somebody told me once that they played the Sega's Football Manager, Sports Interactive Football Manager, and they played 200 hours and 7 seasons. And I said, yeah, but if you play mine, you play 200 hours, you play 200 seasons. You know, it's a different way it works. And yeah, people accumulated 360 million he's got there. What has he got? 3 billion, 3.5 billion. People accumulate these huge funds, but the game still plays well. So the one thing about that was, while I had written that game and people liked it a lot, they did start asking me for extra features, and I did include things like your top scorers and just different things of records and stuff. But I got to a point where I said to people, if I continue this, I will start to change the game from its roots because I'll be adding too many changes. And I kind of had this interactive discussion for a while, and pretty much the decision from them and very much from me was, no, let's keep that game as similar as it's a renewal of an original game, but on mobiles, which is what Football Star Manager is. And I had my own ideas of how I wanted to create a new game, and so I said I'll create that as a new project, which I did a couple of years ago. So that's the future. And that game now is in beta. Kevin Tom's football game, simplified the name, make it easy to find. People find my games more easily by my name than trying to work through all the other football managers that are out there. So I've just kept it simple now. And I've actually been working on this for a couple of years, but actually full-time for the last 6 months. I've been very determined and getting poorer every month as I've been doing it. So there's a limit, but I've managed to get it now to beta form. So it's playable. It's a public beta on iOS. I think very soon I'll actually deploy it live. And then I'll do Android as well. I'm focusing just on those two as the primary destinations for it. And the reason is because what I'm trying to do this time is something different, something I find more fun. If I hark back to saying like Football Star Manager, like making changes was a problem because it changes the original game. This is a complete recreation, keeping its roots, but I built the whole framework to allow me to evolve the game incrementally, take advantage of the App Store updates, and keep improving the game. So there's loads and loads of teams there, all different types you can choose from. You can be any team you want. It just reminds me, actually, one thing I get, I don't know why Southampton, but I've regularly been questioned online why Southampton wasn't in the original game, as if I'd specifically chosen to exclude Southampton or had some bitch about them or something. The only reason was because the first game I had 8 characters for each team, and Southampton was too long, and I didn't like Sutton. So the other thing was there was only 64 of the 92 teams in the Football League at the time, so a lot were left out. But Southampton fans seemed to particularly notice it. But I always included the ability to edit the names, so you could always do it. Anyway, so I never understood why it was a big problem, but that's the same.
Is it because you're forced to make hate
No? Oh, maybe, yeah. Maybe they thought because I was in Bournemouth. I don't know, but yeah. But I don't think there was no particular reason apart from just the length of the name. And yeah, this is totally customizable in that way. You can do that. Although, in fact, it's customizable now. You can change the name of your team, so you can be any team you want to be. But it is deliberately a basic game with a basic scenario. It's a getting started. It's like I call it a minimum viable game, actually. But I'm launching that first and building out. And it's deliberate. It's a deliberate strategy. So the first game, you're actually just playing in a Champions of Europe competition. You can change your team name, of course, which is what I was just saying. The search is more interesting because one of the things that happened through my Patreon, through Kickstarter I did, a small Kickstarter I did, and through other ways, people can have their own names as footballers in the game. There's 50,000 footballers in the game, though. You know, what's the chance of the one you coming up in your team? It's a bit low at this stage. So the search is actually to search through to find yourself. So you can, it's an ego search for you to say, look, I am in this game, to show other people, and also to satisfy yourself that I did put the name in. Game features, I put my own message there because I want to be very much communicative about how the game's going to evolve this time. So what's coming up, what's change is going to come, because that's a key. The sound is on is a button there because one of the things I got asked is, I need my partner not to know I'm playing the game. Can you put the sound, give me a switch to switch the sound off? So I built that in from day one this time because I knew it was be needed. Even to the level, actually, I've got to say, even to the level that the Football Star Manager, so I can make it work on desktop and so it would also look more retro, I did it in landscape mode. And I even had people telling me, when I turn my phone sideways, she knows that I'm playing the games instead of doing what I should be doing. So, so please make it portrait, which this one is, which is more familiar anyway. So the fixtures, I mean, they vary a lot, but this is just one selection. And it shows the formations as well. It's one of the new things I'm doing. But there's a lot I've built into this game that at the moment is like not fully used because the plan's going to come in over time, including formations. So you've got a choice of formations this time, which will affect the strength of your team. And that's one thing where I thought hard about this and decided I really wanted this core. The core being that the team has 5 primary attributes: defense, midfield, attack, fitness, and morale, which goes right back to the roots. But you can see it's slightly different just by the fact that defense is 21, which you couldn't have in the original game. But although I'm using that core, I'm using it differently, but I still like it as basic attributes. But obviously you've got formations as well, and you've got the ability to change from attacking, defensive there. Keep it very easy to use with the subtlety underneath, basically. And a game that's going to evolve over time. And this is just the match results. The thing is, this is actually already out there now. And the league table, and I chose a team that I don't know how to pronounce. That's Abator. I don't know. But that's just that's the league table. So you're playing in the European League, trying to become champions. And you get an evaluation all the way through. So in this position, I'm league position 18th. Target position, that's 1 in that one, but it'll vary. So the targets, what you've got to aim at, will be set for you. I haven't achieved that target position, but there's 18 matches left. And the media are already slightly disappointed in me. And in the current version of the game that I'm playing, they are very disappointed in me because I've been playing 3 seasons and I haven't done very well at all. So it's got a lot of flavor of the straightforward gameplay of the original game, but it's going to grow a lot over time. And the idea is the game's design journey is kind of open, and you kind of see it happen. So yeah, just a bunch. Oh, that's another thing. That's a bunch of screens. Oh yeah, the rating of the fixtures tells you how hard the teams are. A traffic light system there as well. And of course, that flashing, that red and yellow flashing goal goes right back to the original Spectrum game, and I've included that.
Does it still have the animation for playing?
Not yet, no. In fact, that's a decision I've made because that takes quite a lot of work. And I actually want to expand the strategy and tactics part a lot first. So I'm pushing that back until I'm ready. And so I want to create much more in the other attributes of the game because I'm expanding those out quite a bit. And that's it. You can keep in touch with me. It's very easy to find. linktr.ee/Kevin Toms is. It's easy to find me with Linktree, but also at Kevin Toms on Twitter and Kevin Toms Games on Facebook. Also, my name finds things on the App Store as well. In fact, I'm fairly easy to find. So that's the history, the middle, and the future to come. Thank you. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Yeah?
You mentioned a football manager board game.
Yeah.
Was that yours? That was someone else's?
That was someone else's, the one that came out. I did a football manager board game several iterations when I was a teenager. And so much so that I actually asked my parents to check with the careers master if I could get a job as a board game designer. But when I then eventually became a computer programmer, I started playing around with using computer programs to do the same thing and found it was much better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you know of any real-life football managers that cut their teeth on your game?
Yeah, well, I think it's in that article. I saw it. Bill Nicholson was a Tottenham manager who used to play it. I mean, yeah, there's quite a few at the time that used to play, and footballers as well. But
Would that have helped them?
I don't know if they would have helped them. I was told by teachers once that it was quite good educationally because people concentrated on it. They learnt maths and strategy and things like that. So it helped different things, but I don't know that it was at that level of help.
And the last question, I guess you are a football fan then?
Yeah, I love football. I'm always watching football. And my teams are Torquay United, which is painful. They're now dropped to Division 6. And Bournemouth, because I lived in Bournemouth. So at least I get some joy with them being in the Premier League. Yeah. So, sorry, I'll just ask this last one. Yeah, in the blue.
And got me into those sticker albums as well, so it's very addictive time of my life.
Yeah.
The skill level, did it make a lot of difference? I only remember playing it on skill level, I don't know which one it was.
On one what? Sorry?
Your game had a skill level, didn't it?
Yeah, oh yes, skill level. Yeah, no, that was important. There were 7 skill levels in the game, from beginner to genius. And people still, even actually that's true of Football Star Manager as well. And people talk quite a lot about that because once you get to the highest level, 7 on Football Star Manager, it's really tough, really tough to be successful. But the thing it always makes me think of was one guy at a computer game show who came up to me and he said, I love playing your Football Manager. And he said, I always play it on level 1. And I said, oh, maybe it was you. So I said, well, level 1's quite easy. It's like intended to make it, well, you weren't a football fan. And I said, that's quite easy to succeed in. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said, well, don't you want to upgrade the level to make it a bit more of a challenge? He said, I like winning. And I thought, well, I can't argue with that,
I think the graphics work because it's kind of delay gratification. It makes it work.
Tension.
The graphics, people are mentioning it, the tension.
Yeah.
You've really got all the psychological aspects of it.
Yeah.
When I was only 9, I was doing absolutely nothing. Do you ever think about maybe expanding into other sports?
Did look at that. There wasn't really time. The other people sent. There was a head coach game. Somebody sent that to me, which was a clone, really. And people said to me about cricket, and I said, but it takes 5 days and ends in a draw. So I said, don't want to do that. So thank you. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I got older. I was really addicted to the game, and it really annoyed me that when you were 4-0 up, watching the animation, the England's 5-4. I did play on genius level, and I like working from the 4th division.
Yeah.
All the way up.
Yeah.
And then the cup games and whatever. But sometimes you just lose.
Yes.
You the team look much better than the team.
That's essential. That's... So, for example, when I did Football Star Manager, that aspect is really important, that it's... when you have a better team, you should win, of course. But like real football, you'll see the top team lose to the bottom team unexpectedly. So you have to have that as possible, but it mustn't happen too much. And getting that fine balance is difficult. And with Football Style Manager, when I was working on that aspect of the game, I spent 3 months just on that game balance, just working on getting the formulae right to make that work. Thank you. Well, that's a very important point. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
That's the kind of game. I think part of the reason it's sort of endured in so many people's memories is your mind fills in so much with the bits that you
Yes.
and it's beautiful in a way. It's just so
Yeah.
simple. And you build this world around it. So
Yeah.
it's a fantastic game. I think one thing I'd be interested in what you're talking about is obviously your background in computing. I'd like to know how you sort of ended up there. That sort of initial porting from the TRS-80 to the ZX81, what sort of languages were you using then? Was it sort of something
Well,
high level or low level? Or
there would be no sense in creating a strategy. I used to get criticized for it, but there would be no sense in creating a strategy game using assembler because you spend a lot of time tweaking the numbers and the algorithms. So it would just be hard work. It's all right for moving bits around the screen, sprites around the screen, but not for that kind of work, mathematical stuff. So I took advantage that the computers used to come with BASIC at that time. Later I was using Forth, and then now I use Flutter and Dart for the latest version actually. But you're right that that's why it can be just text, because you fill it in with your imagination. You're not reliant on the graphics. That's an important point. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Yes, kind of following on from that point, were you actually doing development on the host machines, or were you doing it on the tank phone and then porting it across? How did you actually manage that development process?
The original were all done on the original machines. When it came to cloning it onto different ones, it became a tiresome task, and I would get other people to do some of the conversions to different computers. But I very much prefer to write all the code myself because I can tweak it. So if they're taking code that's already got the algorithms done, that's all right. But I don't just design the game, I code it and I change things a lot as I develop. So.
Did you have to actually take it from the tank, just type it in from a listing, or were you actually
Yeah, that was what it was doing with going from the TRS-80 to the ZX81, because it was already working on the TRS-80. I got that working first on the Video Genie, and I was trying it out on people, and I couldn't get them off it once they started playing it. So that told me I'd created something good, and then I made the choice to do this new computer that had come along, the ZX81. Like I said, from a business point of view, that was a very good choice. But the playability was clear from when I let people try it.
much harder keyboard, I guess, to actually do all the development?
Yeah, it was. Later on, I think I got an additional keyboard, but yeah, it was at first. But I mean, it used to interpret with the BASIC. It used to interpret what you were trying to do, so it wasn't that bad. But mainly it's things like the RAM wobbling and losing stuff. So like saving regularly to cassette. So a bit boring and disciplined work. And I used to manufacture the games in a spare room, and I could hear it, the noise, so I knew when each game had finished, and then replace the cassette and do another game as well. But later on, of course, cross-development. And as I say, now I use Flutter and Dart, so it's a nice tool to work with. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.